Anyextee here, and tonight we are coming to you live from the Luxor Temple. Set up my gimbal here. Give me 1 second. There we go. So we got the prayer call in the background. I'll just wait a minute to begin here and wait for some of you to start showing up for this random unexpected live on a Friday night here in Luxor. I'm on the Avenue of the Sphinxes, Wat Neter, the Road of the Gods, and just gonna take you through the Luxor Temple tonight. What's up, Stein? Looks like you're the only one here right now. Just hanging out at the Luxor Temple on a Friday night. Walk through and take a look at a few things. This is all part of the Roman encampment back here. In fact, there's still excavations going on till this day in the back on the other side of this wall. What's up, Snake Charmer? Take a look at this. Let me show you guys something here. Okay. Look at this face. It almost looks Asiatic. It almost looks like one of those Olmecs you would see, right? And then come over here and look at this face. Completely different. Almost all the faces have distinct characteristics. So there's a few theories on that. And one of them could be that during the time of the construction of the Avenue of the Sphinxes, when Nectanebo was commissioning the Sphinxes, they might have actually had artisans from different nomes who were using the distinct characteristics related to that nome. Here's another one, completely different facial features if you look really close at the detail. Here's a Roman mud brick wall behind us. No holes on top of the heads, no sign. Let's see if we can get a better view. Let me see if I can, I'll put the gimbal on top of the head here and show you. So there's no crown face at the top of these. Oh, can't quite get enough of height there to show you. Maybe on this side. But this is all the work of Nectanebo. And so, Wat Neter, the Road of the Gods, what we call the Avenue of the Sphinxes, goes from here, the Luxor Temple in Luxor, part of the world's largest open-air museum. It goes all the way down to Karnak. And I've made videos on this. In fact, several videos walking the complete length, the entire length of the Avenue of the Sphinx. So you can check those out here on this channel. What's up, Tina? Yes, the Temple of Min and the Temple of Man. Your comment just faded, so I didn't get to see it all, but you said Temple of Min. And I don't know if that was a misspelling for Temple of Man, because academically speaking, from the traditional Egyptologist point of view, it's not considered a temple of man. There are no temples consecrated to man. They're all consecrated to the divine principles, the Neteru. And here, you know, we would say it's consecrated to Amun, or the triad of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, mostly Amun and the king and his royal Ka. However, from the symbolist point of view, of course, the work of R.A. Schwab-Lubitz, my mentor, John Anthony West, and proponents of the symbolist school, such as myself, we view the temple as the temple of man. And we can cover some of that as I go through the temple. I do have a book coming out. I just finished it. I just sent it out for endorsements. I'm looking for some of my colleagues to review the book and write some endorsements for that. And so I'm just waiting to complete that, and then we'll be publishing the book. But it's interesting you say Temple of Min, because there was also the Festival of Min, which took place here. So one of the common misnomers that a lot of people don't understand is they think that, you know, the access would be through the central part of the pylon here. And that's not the case. Even for the Opet festival, which took place here, that would have come from the Nile, and it would have come in through the side entrance, which we can go around and take a look at. However, the central entrance was actually used for the Festival of Min. And in a sense, we could look at it as a temple of Min. Min being here represented as Amun Min Kamutef, a syncretization of Min and Amun. Anyway, let me see if I can get to the top of one of these heads here for Stein. Tina, the area between Luxor and the Red Sea is devoted to Min. Yes, absolutely, 100%. And so they would take the statue of Min out. And how do we know this? We know this because just on the other side of this pylon, where you have the Mosque of Abu el-Hagag, which is Abu in Arabic is like father, and Hagag, I'm slightly mispronouncing it, is someone who's been to Mecca. So it's the father who's been to Mecca, but that's the mosque in the back, which also represents thousands of years of religious worship. One of the oldest temples that's had continuous use of religious worship, because you've had the ancient Egyptian religion, then you had the Coptic, Christians that built a church here, and then the mosque, which is built on top. I had the opportunity to go into the mosque the other night and take some extraordinary photos from the top of the mosque, looking down. Yeah, trust me, I have my Arabic friends try to school me on the pronunciation, and I still struggle with that word to this day. That said, on the other side here, I've been inside the mosque and I've been up top, and I've been able to take some extraordinary photos looking down. And what's remarkable about the mosque is that inside we have the remnants of the temple that the average typical tourist don't see. The mosque, you can actually see some of the columns that were built around. Stein says, and then the sun in the middle. Yeah, so we can talk about that in a minute. Let me see if I don't think there's any hole on top. In this case, this isn't going to have an affixed crown, which is what you're looking for. You can see some of the signs that they've put up from the restorations that took place here. Stein was talking about the sun in the middle. Of course, we have the two great pylons. The pylons, generally speaking, demarcate sacred space, as well as the enclosure wall around the temple. But this would be more sacred space, and the further back you go to the Holy of Holies, the seat of the temple, you have the highest concentration of sacred space. Sacred space being the place where terrestrial forces converge with that of the cosmic, where the divine, was strongest, and where they venerated the emergence of the primordial mound from the ancient traditions. It's considered the birthplace of the gods, birthplace of the primordial mound, which we can look at the Ben stone. But you have these pylons which demarcate the sacred space between the outer world and the inner sacred world. And what do you notice? You notice that it takes on the form of the Opet. It's the same, it's in Egyptian hieroglyphic language, the symbol for the Opet is very much like the symbol of the pylons. From the perspective of R.A. Schwalb-Lubitz, who used the term primordial scission, that is the idea that before creation we come from undifferentiated consciousness, which becomes conscious of itself, and it splits essentially. You have in other terms, in Egyptian terms, you have the primeval waters of chaos, and at some point those waters get stirred up, and then from there eventually it comes in. It's all cosmology. Eventually it comes into time and space and form. It's another way of looking at formlessness into form, from spirit into matter, cosmologically speaking. And so the primordial scission would be the time of that split. This was also represented by the ancient Egyptians as Atum, the principle of Atum, who in a sense masturbates and duplicates himself. Thus, from that we get the duality. It's where our world begins to receive it's before creation. It's when creation was imminent, before it happened, creation before creation, and coming in out of the void into the material world, where we now have as above, so below, as within, so without, left, right, night and day, masculine and feminine principles. But this would be representing the primordial scission, especially with the sun in the middle. At one time there were two obelisks here. You see there's one here now. The other one was taken away to the Place de la Concorde in France. The English wanted this one, never got it, but the other one was taken away. We can get closer. They're actually not exactly aligned, and the obelisks were never the same height. which is interesting. And it's unfortunate that there's more obelisks outside of Egypt than in Egypt, because we really can't say we really can't examine now the functionality or the idea, you know, the theory that was first posited by Lucy Lammy, stepdaughter of Schwalbe Lubitz, and my mentor John Anthony West, that the obelisks were tuning forks. And so, interesting fact is that Ashurbanipal, the leader of from Mesopotamia, or the Persians, basically, when the Persians came into Egypt, they did massive damage. This is before the Greeks came here, and Alexander the Great and so forth, and in a sense restored Egypt. They did massive damage. In fact, Ashurbanipal, you know, has a whole diary of the damage he's done in Egypt. He took some of the obelisks back, but he also noted in his diary how when he came here to Thebes, ancient Thebes, which was what the Greeks referred to, what we call today as Luxor. Actually, in ancient times, for the ancient Egyptians, it would have been known as Was. But he talked about how he noticed, you know, it almost seemed like a shining light, like an electricity going between the obelisks. And the thing to consider is, at that time, the top of the obelisk, the pyramidal part up here, would have been coated with electrum, which would have been part silver, part gold. And so we do have to call into question how that affects the terrestrial forces, serving as a conduit for that sort of energy that goes unseen, the invisible energy. But certainly there is a science behind it. You know, it's not fully worked out. This, of course, ties into the sacred science. But, you know, the obelisk is also symbolic. In a sense, we could look at it from an alchemical perspective, where you have the, you know, the earth coming up into the sky. There are two ancient Egyptian names for it. It's been referred to as Tekenu, which literally means to pierce the sky. Why? Because, and there's another word, I forget the other ancient Egyptian word, but it means protection. And ultimately it was looked at as like an arrow. So, you know, the ancient Egyptians would defend their land with archers, with bows and arrows, and they would position their soldiers with arrows. As you'll see, many of them on the Battle of Kadesh on the walls here. And so the obelisks were considered to represent arrows, to bring protection to the land, but there surely is a deeper, more profound, esoteric significance to it. And we do go into more depth on this in my forthcoming book, which is an esoteric symbolist guidebook to the Luxor Temple of Man, which builds upon the works of Schwalbe Lubitz, my mentor John Anthony West, as well as adding my own insights to this. I also give a complete description of the hieroglyphics in detail on the inside, as well as offer a practicum in the back of the book, a practical application for approaching the Luxor Temple of Man. But it serves as an introduction to the symbolist approach to the Luxor Temple, and again offers an alternative esoteric approach for the temple. Anyway, I'll be providing an update on that in the near future, and of course we go into more depth on these subjects during my Esoteric Egypt tours. I do have 2 tours coming up, one in a few weeks, next month, September, with Johanna James. We're going to have the Ancient Technology and Symbolism tour. That'll be followed by my tour with Kaylee from the popular Kaylee with History YouTube channel. I'll be doing an Esoteric Egypt tour with her in October. And we do have space left, so if you want to join those tours, head over to adeptexpeditions.com to reserve your spot. This is relatively new. This went up in the last 4 months or so. They put the signs up for everyone that was associated with the Avenue of the Sphinxes, right? And so it starts with Hatshepsut, which I'll show you when we go inside. You have the shrine of Thutmose and Hatshepsut, which they refer to as, you know, the Ramses shrine, but Ramses, we know, basically usurped it, and it's the oldest extent here at Luxor. Although the temple itself, especially the Holy of Holies in the back, the Opet Risut, the southern sanctuary, may have indeed been built, and and there's evidence to support this, may have been built on a Middle Kingdom site, and perhaps even Old Kingdom. Luxor isn't really known for Old Kingdom sites, but I actually just, you know, when we think of the Old Kingdom, we think of Giza, we think of Saqqara. When we think of Luxor, we think of the New Kingdom, and in many cases on Middle Kingdom sites. But a recent video I put up looking at out-of-place artifacts at the site of Tot which is just right outside Luxor, still considered part of the area. There is evidence for the Old Kingdom. I mean, we literally have an obelisk there from the, not an obelisk, a granite pillar from the Old Kingdom. It was actually the video before the last that I uploaded to this channel, the one right before my Living in Luxor vlog, which, by the way, I'll have a new vlog up this Sunday. Every Sunday, Family Fun Day, I put up my Living in Luxor vlog series where I chronicle my life here with my family living in Luxor. This week, we're going to show you snow in Egypt. Snow. Who knew Egypt had snow? But we're going to show you snow in Egypt, and we're going to show you another side of Egypt that you've never seen. These are more fun videos that kind of break away from the more heady esoteric stuff or the investigations and explorations at these sites. But yeah, so over here we have everybody that was involved with the Avenue of the Sphinxes, starting with Hatshepsut, who she would have had the oldest extent would have been, it was sort of like a way station, if you will. What's up, Megalithic Hunter? Megalithic Hunter in the house. We just hung out in Malta. If you see her in the comments, make sure to click over and subscribe to Megalithic Hunter's channel. She does excellent work. And so anyway, what were we saying? Yeah, so Hatshepsut, the oldest extent here at Luxor, would have been Hatshepsut and Thutmose's shrine. I'll show you the evidence and how we know this, which is now considered a Ramses chapel. It's a triple chapel for the triple, it's like a triple bark chapel for the Opet festival. It would have been the last of 6 stations along the Avenue of the Sphinx. So we have Amenhotep III. Now, who else is here? Who's this? Luxor in Egypt. In Saudi Arabia, Petra, Jordan. I couldn't read the comment fader. And if I don't respond to everybody's comment now, after the video, I'll come back and I'll try to address as many as I can. So this temple was commissioned by the great Amenhotep III, who was a prolific builder here in Luxor. He had his other temple right across the Nile over there where I live on the West Bank, which would have been the largest temple in all of Egypt. Right now, Karnak is the largest temple. There isn't much standing from Amenhotep III's temple. Much of it was constructed out of mud brick, so it was destroyed by the Nile. And so here, and actually we have to give full credit to his genius architect. This is a most enlightened being, a self-realized individual known as Amenhotep, son of Hapu. There were many Amenhoteps back in those days. The name Amenhotep, often the Egyptologists will tell us it means he who comes in peace, because Hotep is like peace, and you'll see the Hotep sign as an offering, the offering tables, the Hoteps. We can talk about that later or in another video, but you know, an Amen, a derivative of Amen, comes from Amun, the principle, the main principle here in Luxor, which literally means hidden. And Amun is the breath of life across the waters. He is the invisible principle behind the matrix of creation. Amun flows through each and every one of us, and everything you see. Everything around us is Amun, everything within us is Amun. Amun is essentially a principle of creation. And so you have Amun Hotep, the invisible Hotep, if you will, the unseen Hotep, which Egyptologists, again, they tell us it transliterates, or translates rather, to, you know, he who comes in peace. We've always looked at it from a symbolist perspective, you know, looking at it from a different scale as, you know, he who is realized. Because you have to really think about the word peace and how we interpret the word peace and harmony. I myself am a member of the Self-Realization Fellowship, which was brought here to the West by Paramahansa Yogananda, where I learned the science of Kriya, Pranayama, yoga meditation, something I've been involved with for many years. And so the goal is to become realized. It's the same for the pharaohs. It was the royal principle. The idea, the pharaoh was a prototype for what all man could become, right? The pharaoh is the intermediary, or what in other traditions you would look at as a shaman, one who could transcend this world and connect, literally bring as above, you know, and connect with as above, so below, as within, so without, one who could go between the worlds, one who was primed and conditioned for that. He had to go through strict, or she, as in the case of Hatshepsut, had to go through strict purification rituals and ceremonies such as the Hepsed, you know, with the priesthood to condition themselves and then give offerings and keep the offerings going between the divine. And this is one of those temples where we will, you know, see a temple also dedicated to divine, where we will see the connection between man and the divine. The civilization in the city of Albeda is similar to... Comments keep fading away, so I can't read them all. But these are all everyone that was associated in some way or another with the avenue of the Sphinx. Wait, is Avenue of the Sphinx or the temple? I forget. I've read these before. Yeah, it's all for the Avenue of the Sphinxes. All of these guys played a role here, and one girl, one female. We have Hatshepsut, and so you have Nectanebo, who was the last. Over here, he's the one that did. There's 3 different Sphinxes. He's the one that did the install the human head on the lion's body, almost like we see at Giza with whether you want to view the Sphinx as Tefnut or Raharakte, the idea of the intelligence or consciousness of man partaking in the divine. It's human. It's basically, you have 3 different Sphinxes. It's basically human intelligence or human consciousness partaking in the divine, being the lion. The lion is always attributed to a solar principle, such as the sun, the divinity, and then we have human consciousness. So it's the fusion or the synthesis between the two. But this is a step further. This is actually the realized man, like the architect Amenhotep, son of Hapu, which I mentioned constructed this masterpiece, which I truly believe is on par with the Great Pyramids of Giza. Looking at it from an exoteric point of view, you probably wouldn't agree. You'd say, oh, it's just another temple. Yes, Anyextee, there's enormous, you know, giant statues and so forth. But when you understand the deeper esoteric aspects, the cosmology, the whole didactic teaching that goes on here, for me, it's on par with the pyramids. It actually, in some ways, represents some of the same principles in another way. Anyway, you have the 3 Sphinxes. You have the Andro Sphinx, which is the head of the man on the lion's body. We have the Creo Sphinx, which is ram head on lion's body. And then we have the full body ram. Now, this hasn't been fleshed out really anywhere else, but in my forthcoming book, I have a chapter on the symbolism of the Sphinxes and talking about the different cosmological stages and what the symbolism of the Sphinxes represent. I will put a video up here on the channel in the near future discussing the symbolism of the Sphinxes and why we see, you know, human head on lion body, ram head on lion body, and full body ram taking place throughout time. This isn't recognized by Egyptology, full disclaimer. This is my own original research based on my studies and cross comparative, you know, and also looking at cosmology and so forth. As you guys can see, there's a lot of people here, which is good because the tourists are coming back. For a while, I've had the temples all to myself since I live here, but now tourism is starting to come back, which is good for the Egyptians. Let them make their money. This is Hadrian's Chapel over here. There's an Isis inside. You have this Tutmosis stela, which was actually restored in later times. You can see there the hieroglyph for Semenu, which means restoration. You see the three little new jars. Semenu, which means that this mine was restored at a later time. So Tutmosis is not uncommon. This was actually found. There was 2 of these, and it was actually found over here, right in front of this, which is a bit of a mystery because the way the temple was constructed, in the back is where it started, right? In the Holy of Holies, the seed that grew out over time. The temple starts with Amenhotep III, and then, you know, comes the time of Akhenaten, his son, who actually turns against the building program here and goes out to the virgin desert of Amarna to do his thing. And then, you know, they bring Tut back into the fold, and the priesthood sort of conditions him, if you will, to get back in favor with the Amun priesthood, and they restore the old ways. They bring back, you know, some of the things that Akhenaten had changed. And then after that, you have Horemheb, who did some work in the colonnade, and then Ramses the Great. And actually Seti has some work on the colonnade, but most of this is the work of Ramses. So it's a bit of a mystery why we would see Tutmosis, who comes before Amenhotep III over here. But that's because, like I said, he's from around the time of Hatshepsut, and when Egyptologists were working here, they found a lot of that stuff from the earlier part of the New Kingdom. One of the things that nobody ever talks about, actually, before we go over there, take a look at this statue. A lot of you might be wondering, they'll tell you this is Merenptah. Merenptah was the son of Ramses, and that's because if we look at the cartouche, the two cartouches right there, you can see the hieroglyphs for the name Merenptah, right? And then also on the shoulder, which breaks cartouche protocol, because typically, whenever you see cartouches on the chest or the arm, that's non-traditional, right? So that's later. And just look very close here. Look at the work of the cartouche versus the actual, precision and detail of the actual object itself, of the statue, right? So look at the necklace versus the cartouche. It's clearly the work of two different scribes. Over here is Merenptah's mother, following a tradition of Ramses, right? Ramses would put his wife or daughters on the side of his legs. His son is doing the same thing. Although you can see it's somewhat degenerating now, because over there they were still even sculpting. Over here he's just etching it in. And we see his cartouches. But this is not Merenptah. And if you look close at the actual statue and you pay attention to the detail of the statue and you look at the collarbone, there's been even a big analysis done on this with Chicago House. But if you look at the collarbone, you can tell this statuary, this is Amenhotep III. This is the one who commissioned the temple long before Merenptah. Merenptah just came along and put his cartouche on the statue to venerate his mother, as his father Ramses would have done. But, to the untrained eye, you wouldn't know. You would just read the hieroglyphs and then they say, oh, yeah, this is Merenptah. It says right there. No, number one, the cartouches on the chest and on the arm were breaking typical protocol for cartouches, number one. And then number two, you could tell, very distinct, the two different styles. Very fine necklace here. It's not quite a Menot necklace, but you see the necklace versus this, which is etched on later. The quality of the work is not the same. And so the head is missing, but when you look at the actual physique of the stone, this was common for the stone during the time of Amenhotep III. Not so common during the time of Merenptah. So we know this statue was a statue of Amenhotep III, which was usurped. And it's not the only one here like that. We'll talk about some of these other statues. On the walls here, we have what's known as the Battle of Kadesh. The whole story where Ramses was cut off from his troops and he was basically set up. But then they'll say, like he prayed to Amun. I would say more like he went within and connected with the divine force of creation. Essentially, he meditated. He went within and connected, had a connection. The Egyptians were all about connection, had a connection with the divine, and allowed Amun, the principle of creation, to flow through him, and he laid waste to all the enemy soldiers, one at a time, which tells us he had a focused mind. This wall is also highly symbolic because there's two versions of Ramses. There's one facing this way to the east, and then there's Ramses facing to the west. The east, the rising sun; the west, over there on the west bank of the Nile, where the sun sets, which is attributed to what we could say death, although in the esoteric tradition we refer to it as transition, because it's the greatest initiation of all. There is no death. And it's a symbol for, we can look at it, but what the West represents essentially is transformation or completion, right? The East represents potential, something that is imminent, something that is about to be, the sun in the morning. And the West, the sun has set. It is complete. It has transformed the day cycle, and then the sun goes into the underworld and comes back around. A complete cycle. The sun doesn't just go over here, set and die, and that's the end of it. It sets, and we have a full, complete circle. And so that's represented here. So Schwaller interpreted that, you know, it was about the forces of day versus night, the forces of light and dark, overcoming the forces of darkness. So in other words, rather than this just merely being military propaganda to, you know, you'll always see these battle scenes on the outer pylons as if the ancient Egyptians were trying to send a message to foreign invaders. But rather than merely looking at it from an exoteric point of view as military propaganda, it was actually had a deeper esoteric understanding of overcoming the forces of, thank you, David, I appreciate that, of overcoming the forces of darkness. And that means overcoming the forces of darkness within. And that's what you needed to do before you could enter the temple. So we're very fortunate today that we can go inside the temple because in ancient times, this was reserved for the initiates, the priesthood, the high priest, and Pharaoh himself, the everyday common person like you and I. Although, let's face it, me and none of my subscribers are common people. If you're watching my channel, I sincerely doubt any of you are commoners. You're probably just like me and you have an interest in ancient civilizations or esoteric mysteries, which by definition, in a sense, sets us apart from most people. But that said, those most people, by the way, my mentor John Anthony West would refer to as grockles. Grockles are all tourists that on us. Anyway, we couldn't just enter the temple. You would have to go, one, you'd have to be an initiate. You'd have to be a priest, a pharaoh, and you'd have to go through a strict purification ritual. Many temples had sacred lakes, essentially like holy water. So every time I enter a temple, I usually bring a bottle of water with me and just drink a little and pour some out of my hands symbolically for purification of you know, mind. And but we've got a lot of people coming out here, a big group. This is just a practice that I use. Anyway, there's here we have the baboons, the 4 baboons. There would have actually been 8. Interesting, 8, a sign of repetition and pattern, and a number also attributed to Thoth, which is a Greek corruption of Jehuti. And over here you can see, so this is the other obelisk that's now at the Palace de la Concorde. It's been taken out of Egypt. And down here, just, you know, you can see the cartouche. The cartouche was meant to perpetuate the king's name, right? So you would use honorific transposition. You don't start with Ra, but you have Usur, Ma'atra, and this is Nisut Biti, which is, some say, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, the king of 2 lands. From an esoteric point of view, the king of 2 worlds, inner and outer. But look back here. We can see the remnants of the baboons here. So we know that there were once baboons over there, but this obelisk has been restored. So there have been baboons on both sides. I originally thought they might have just been facing the east for symbolic reasons, but there's actually, they're facing sort of northeast and south. And then the obelisk has a bunch of titles attributed to Ramses, the bull of his mother over here. So these are all basically titles attributed to Ramses. The Sara or Sare, this means son of the sun, son of Ra, or son of Re, depending on how you want to pronounce it. The Egyptologists will say son of the sun. From a more esoteric point of view, we could think of it as son of the light, one of the light. But yeah, you have all of these are just repeated titles of Ramses, and this is all one massive single piece of stone. That, I mean, the obelisks some present somewhat of a mystery themselves. The fact that it would have been taken all the way from Aswan, so you have to give consideration to first how they quarried it out of the stone, and then loaded it on. I mean, it's thought that they came down on barks. There are some other theories that they came by land, but whatever the case, you'd have to transport it, you know, all these miles. Here, what we're about like 150, 240 kilometers, 150 miles, something like that. They're from Aswan. I mean, and then they've also brought stones all the way up into the Delta, even Tanis. But anyway, you know, the transportation is mind-boggling. Then erecting them. How did they erect the obelisk? So we're not quite certain. The favorable theory is that they would have built like a mud brick enclosure wall right here. and then they would have had an opening, and they would have loaded it up with sand, and they would have used ramps, and they would have basically pulled the they would have had like wood underneath as rollers, and they would have pulled the obelisk up in over the mud brick into the sand. Somebody would have been pulling it from a rope on this side until they got it just where they wanted it, and then start taking the sand away and use the sand, use natural forces to bring it down. And these things are exact right down to the millimeter. The only problem I have with that theory is when you're bringing it down, it's still going to land on sand. So I mean, what did they have some sort of ancient vacuum cleaner technology that blew all the sand away? That's the one part of the theory that I'm still uncertain of how they would have managed to do that. But this is a miraculous feat in and of itself, to be able to erect the obelisk, never mind quarrying it, getting it here, you know, one single piece of stone. Here's a giant, you know, colossi of Ramses. This one used to be missing the head over here, and this one is interesting. This one's very suspect. They found this one, pieces of it. So when the archaeologists were working on the avenue of the Sphinx, they actually unearthed it and found pieces of it here. It wasn't the whole thing. As you can see, look close, it's a completely different color. This is mostly restoration. Restoration standards, it has to be like, they have to have 20% of the statue to consider it authentic. They consider this one authentic, but it's hard for me to really justify 20%, because you can see just this strip right here. And if you look close, so most of this statue wasn't the original statue. You have this strip right here, which they put onto this mold, and then part of his eyes, his forehead, the cobra, the uraeus, some of the hands, and that's it. The rest of this is all a mold. These, you know, you wouldn't even know. The average tourist walks by here and thinks, oh, this is all ancient Egyptian statue. But it's really just this piece, some of this, some of this, some of this, which they found here, and they were able to restore and put back up here. But I want you to pay close attention to this. First of all, if you look really close at the face, it doesn't match the other faces. It looks, the others look very similar in terms of the eyes and the features. They almost look like, it's like Chris Dunn's idea that they all came out of a manufacturing, you know, some sort of manufacturing. The precision is on point. They all look very identical. This one doesn't look the same. What's up, Matt? That guy from Ancient Architects. If you're not already following Matt's channel, Ancient Architects, which I'm sure you are, because most of my subscribers came from Matt. Big shout out to Matt for sending subscribers my way. That's the homie. If you're not aware, Matt now has his own channel, aside from Ancient Architects. I believe it's called That Guy from Ancient Architects. It's the Matt Simpson YouTube channel, where he takes you behind the scenes. And so he's just getting started. So make sure you check out Matt's new, oh, he's telling me to shush. Yeah, well, he's already put up one video, so you should head over to his YouTube channel and check it out. Anyway, what I want you to look at is, notice the position of all the other standing giant statues here. This one is in what we call Osirian or a Syriad pose. It's basically the pose of Osiris in his best form. And you'll see different classifications of this. Sometimes it's a little lower, sometimes it's in the middle, and sometimes it's up above. That's a subject for another video. But notice, this is what I want you to take notice of, because I'm going to show you a clue inside the temple that's going to prove this statue doesn't belong here. So I'm going to say that this statue does not belong here. Yes, they found pieces here, which you have to realize is there were all sort of, this was all, much of this was buried. A lot of this statue was, a lot of this temple was actually restored. Let me show you something. I want to take you over here so you can see a photo of what it looked like back in the day, some of it. And there's been a lot of restoration, and I have to give it up to the Egyptian authorities. They have done an incredible job restoring this temple. But what you see today, it's not, you know, your great-great-great-granddaddy's Luxor Temple or the ancient Egyptians' Luxor Temple. So look, this is from 1870. You can see the obelisk was still standing in 1870, you know, no problem with the obelisk there. But look close, look, there's a guy here, one of the local Saidis. Compare him in scale. This is the top of the head, the white crown, and you have, you know, like they hadn't fully restored everything yet. It's still buried in sand. And this is why the mosque in the back when I take you, I'll show you the level of the door, but it's still buried in sand. So anyway, much of the temple has been, even inside, notice in the back, some of the columns are there, but there's been a lot of work done. I'll point it out when we go inside. But my point here is this statue wasn't here, and they found some pieces in the ground and they put it up here. Now, my guess is they're probably just doing it for tourism to make everything symmetrical. Most tourists aren't going to question this. The untrained eye won't notice. But if you look close, again, you have Osirian pose, and then you have the standard pose with the arms all the way down. Pay attention to this, because inside the temple, there is a relief, a representation of what this facade looked like. And I want you, again, to just keep this in your memory, because I'm going to say that this doesn't belong here. And I have a theory that some of my colleagues that I work with, we think that this actually belongs on the side of the temple. I'll explain. We can do that now. I'll explain why. Before I do that, let's talk about one more bit of symbolism here. Again, I'll go into more depth in this in my forthcoming book, which is the Esoteric Symbolist Guidebook to the Luxor Temple of Man. If you look close, it's hard to make out in the light here, but there's 9 charioteers here. So it's 9 chariots. Each of them has an archer with a bow and arrow. One of the ancient signs in ancient Egyptian was known as the 9 bows, which represented the foreigners, the foreign invaders, the outsiders of Egypt, the enemies of Egypt, essentially. And the 9 bows were almost very commonly depicted beneath the feet of the ancient Egyptians. It was a way of, sort of a form of sympathetic magic, a way of trotting them out, stepping on the enemies. You find, what's this? What's up, everybody? Just coming in now. You find the symbol of the 9 bow. I hope you guys are enjoying this Friday night casual stroll through the Luxor Temple with Anyextee. If you are, do remember to give the video a like. If you're new here, remember to subscribe. If you can in any way support, do feel free to support in the super chat. Anyway, but just you guys watching is support enough. And please share the video with your friends to help me grow the channel, because for whatever reason, algorithms don't seem to favor Anyextee. I don't know if it's my content is too esoteric. Everyone tells me they like my videos, they find them valuable, but yet for some reason, I have a really small viewership, following, subscriber base. I don't know. If you guys can help me with that, grow a channel, that'd be great. Anyway, you have the 9 bows, and this is thought to be, the pylons are thought to be the soles of the feet of the Temple of Man. So when we say Temple of Man, if you were to superimpose the body of when we go through this temple, you're going through the human body of a male. In fact, not just any male, but the perfected male. This is a esoteric term, meaning the fully realized male. It's what the pharaoh represented. We're going to start here in the feet of the pharaoh, and we are going to, what's this? Click on the like button. Thank you. Appreciate that, brother. We're going to start through the feet, and we're going to work our way up all the way through the temple, like a kundalini, all the way up into the pineal gland, all the way up into the third eye. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the different aspects. I'll talk to you guys as long as my phone doesn't die, because the battery's about to die soon and I don't have a charger. But anyway, and again, if you want to learn more, my book is going to be coming out. I go into depth on all this stuff, and you can always join me in the field for one of my tours. We have tours coming up in September and October at adeptexpeditions.com. Me and Johanna James have one in September, and me and Kaylee from History of Kaylee in October. And we'd love to have you guys join. Anyway, 9 bows on the feet. What we're saying is the feet. In other words, thank you so much, Dan Fisher. I appreciate that. Big shout out, Dan. Genuinely appreciate that. It means the world to me. Very, very cool. All right, here we go. I'm just going to drop the gems. The more you guys help support, the more I'm going to come with it. All right, so the whole idea of the Temple of Man, it's based on the biogeometric signatures, the biogeometric makeup and measures of the human body, the geometries and proportions of the human body. The whole temple is an exercise in geometry and proportion. And so this was the original work of R.A. Schwab-Lubitz and his team, his stepdaughter Lucy Lamy, and later Egyptologist Alexander Varil had a role in it, and some others as well. But it was Schwaller who really first put the idea together. Schwaller, I have a video coming up about Schwaller. I'm not finished editing it, but Schwaller was a chemist, a professional chemist. He learned chemistry from his father, as well as an operative alchemist. He essentially brought back the methods for making certain colored glass that they used that were thought to be lost since the Renaissance, the builders of the Gothic cathedrals, which we know were masons that were actually preserving principles from ancient Egypt. The geometries and harmonies that are inside the Gothic cathedrals that were built in the Renaissance embody a lot of the principles and technique, if you will, that came from the ancient Egyptians. And so that's how we're able to look at the temple in this way. But this is thought to be the feet. This is thought to be the bottom of the foot. In fact, in my book, I talk about the reflexology of the Luxor Temple of Man, how certain symbolic aspects correspond to other parts of the body of the temple. So if you will, think from an overview. If you were to take the body of a man and put it on top of the temple and you're looking at it from an aerial view, it will line up with the proportions of the male human body. And from cosmologically speaking, the avenue of the Sphinx is connected to Karnak, which represented the principle of organic creation. So you have the principle of organic creation and the channel between creation and man. And this temple's didactic teaching is really not only about the stages of man and his development, but also the greater cosmological scheme of man and our role, in that cosmological scheme. So we have the 9 bows, where we have 9 archers, each with a bow, intended for the enemies, right here on the pylon, which is a symbolic nod to this whole idea of the Temple of Man. But keep in mind this mystery over here. Remember, we have an Osirian statue. I'm going to walk around everybody to show you what I want to show you here. I'm going to skip a lot of stuff that I would go over during one of my general tours of Egypt. You guys are getting a really sort of a different version or a truncated version. We usually spend more time on some of these topics, like these here and the mystery behind this. Over here, we were talking earlier, someone mentioned how it's the Temple of Min, and in a sense it is. Over here is where we have the depiction of the Min festival, which is now roped off, and this is where we have the Mosque of I'm just gonna say Abu Hagag. That's as close as I can get to it. I apologize for butchering it. I can't fully get that pronunciation down. Yeah, I'm butchering that in Arabic. And I'm Mama Kalin Shadabi. Anyway, so you can see that, the mosque is actually built into the temple. And up there is the line where the sand once was. You can envision what it would have been like for Napoleon and his team of savants. Rosicrucians, by the way. Napoleon was a Grand Master of the Rosicrucian Lodge in France. They were coming here to look for the roots of the esoteric tradition. A lot of people think Napoleon was just coming here seeking out new trade routes for the war, but they had a dual agenda. When they say he brought with him savants, these were scientists, engineers, architects, and enlightened initiatic. It was an enlightened initiatic brotherhood, if you will. They were Rosicrucians. And so so when they were here, they were this is what it would have looked like. All of this the sand would have been up here, and you would have been able to walk into the mosque, and all of this would have been underneath the sand. But this right here, let me back up and show you. This is what they call the triple shrine of Ramses, but this is actually part of it is the oldest extent of the Luxor Temple. It existed before Ramses built this courtyard here all around. Before he even built the courtyard, you had a shrine commissioned by Hatshepsut and Tutmosis, and it would have been the 6th bark sanctuary for the Opet festival. So this would have been here just by itself, but it wouldn't have looked like this. It's been remodeled by Ramses. How do we know? This is how we know. And I've done a lot of research here. I mean, the Egyptologists know. And we can surmise because, number one, you have granite, the granite versus sandstone. A lot of the sandstone is the work of Ramses. But over here, we have granite, and Hatshepsut was no stranger to granite. It was a favored stone. She always had a granite, she had, just like at Karnak, there's a granite lintel and a granite portal. And then, of course, we have these columns here. If I have time, I'll get into the symbolism of the columns. And so these are very old. And so if we come over here, we can find one of the clues. It's a little dark, so I can't see. Let me I got another one over here. Let's see. It's dark right now. Maybe this one will be in better light. So Ramses has put his cartouche over everything. It's difficult to make out here too. I'll have to come back in the day. But what we have is, if you know Middle Egyptian hieroglyphs and you know the bread loaf, which is a semicircle, they say it's a bread loaf, the Egyptian hieroglyph, and I tend to think it is bread. This is one of the things that I defer from my mentor, John Anthony West. He didn't think it was a bread loaf. I do think it is a bread loaf. I think in this case, the Egyptologists have it right. But it's a semicircle. It's actually right here. I don't know if you guys can see that. But it's used to, it represents several things in hieroglyphic language, but it also feminizes things. So it's not uncommon at Hatshepsut's temple. They found an artifact with this feminine symbol, next to formulas or titular names, basically, that would typically be masculine. So that's how we know it was attributed to Hatshepsut. So they would talk about the king, but they would use this symbol, this semicircle, bread loaf, if you will, to feminize it, which let us know it's Hatshepsut. So even though these glyphs here are Ramses, we know that he left the feminine symbol. He left the feminine principle, the sacred divine feminine, behind. So we know that. I'll have to do another video in the light at some point, but we know that that's one clue in the language. Another one, trying to understand how we know this would have been attributed to Hatshepsut. But up here, hard to make out, but you see the Sare, which means son of Ra, son of Re, or better viewed as son of light. And it's the duck in the sign for the sun. Although it's not really a duck, more appropriate, they call it a duck in Egyptology. It's actually a goose. And let me see if I can zoom in. And so the goose's, you guys can't really see it, but the goose's tail has 2 feathers. So in the time of the 18th dynasty, it had 2 feathers. By the 19th dynasty, which was the time of Ramses, it acquired 3 feathers. So this one has 2 feathers, which means it's an 18th dynasty goose. But the rest of the reliefs it's Ramses' cartouche. It's Usurped. It's all supposed to be Ramses. So what he's done is he's usurped. He's gone over. It's almost like a palimpsest. Not really a palimpsest, but he's gone over the older. He's left the older parts and then just added to it. And so we know that is an 18th dynasty signature, which means that it's Hatshepsut's. So this was Hatshepsut's shrine along with Tutmosis, even though it's been usurped by Ramses. And you can see the common elements of Ramses. You got all these deep incised reliefs in sandstone, but then you have the granite, which was one of Hatshepsut's favorite stones, like we see at Karnak. And this triple shrine is where they would have held the 3 barks for Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, which would have been part of the Opet festival. And there's a lot more clues here. There's one other thing I'll show you guys inside here real quick. So you see all the reliefs on these stones here, but if you look, there's also stones on the side. So we know that they flipped the stone and reused it. And all the reliefs in here, for the most part, this is all Ramses. Here you have the solar bark, one of the barks that would have been the bark shrine that would have been carried during the Opet festival, which started at Karnak and came all the way down the Avenue of the Sphinx and would have came in this entrance over here and then returned to Karnak. One of the symbolic features, again, the untrained eye would miss this, but here you have a Jed ram. If you look close, there is a Jed, it's like the design of a Jed pillar, which is the backbone of Osiris, with the head of the ram, which is a sign attributed to Amun. Amun was the ram in the sky, which was also, from an astrological perspective, it was the time of the ram, Aries, after the bull. In ancient Thebes, ancient Luxor, they used to venerate Montu, the falcon-headed god of war, who was also associated with the bull, which would have been Taurus. And so this is Aries, the ingress of Aries. So it's interesting because at the end of the reign of Montu, when Amun, the ram, comes into vogue here in Luxor, is right around the time of that astrological, that shift that happened in the sky. But you find these same exact symbols a replica, like a mirror image in the Holy of Holies in the back. And what's interesting is if you go from the center here, you don't see it, you don't physically see it, but there is an invisible axis. There's 3 axes here. So one of the things about this temple, if you look at the floor plan, it's unusual in that it skews several times. It breaks typical temple protocol. And there's a few different theories. Some of the Egyptologists will say, well, they did that to move along the Nile, corresponding to the Nile. Others will say it's to align with the avenue of the Sphinxes. And then there are those who think it has an astronomical connection, sort of like Norman Lockyer with Stonehenge and other temples that we know are aligned to different events in the sky. But Shwala the Lubitz interpreted something entirely different. And that skewed axis is intentional based on the geometries and proportions of the human body and his role, once again, in the great cosmological scheme of things. So right now, where we are at the temple would be considered the shin. We're actually very close to the ankles of the human body, and I'm walking toward when we get to that portal. Every portal is a different joint in the body. That would be the knees. And what do we see? Our eyes are taken right into the knees of these standing colossi, where each of them are stepping left foot forward. Why left foot forward? Well, there's many reasons. It's hard to conclude on just one, but we do know that one, there's a position in Africa. Some tribes actually use it as a sign of power, but it is on the left side of the body that we have the human heart. For the ancient Egyptians, consciousness wasn't entirely in the head, but in the heart, which was called the Ib or the Ib, depending on how you pronounce it. And so where you have the deceased or the dead, you would have 2 straight legs, like the mummified pharaohs. Their legs are straight, they're bound together. But one step forward, taking a step forward, is taking that first step. And on a deeper cosmological, if we look at it through a different lens here, from a cosmological perspective, it's taking the first step in the cosmology. It's stepping forward. I go into much more depth. Of course, this is borrowed from Schwaller. I go into much more depth in this in my book and add a bit to it. Here we have one of the white crowns. These things are absolutely remarkable. Chris Dunn has done an amazing analysis. I mean, they're so smooth to the touch. Chris Dunn's done a remarkable geometrical analysis on these. But what I want to show you guys is hidden right back here. Oh, and so real quick, we're kind of all over the place here. I'm showing you a bunch of things at once. This entrance, this is the entrance to the Luxor Temple for the Opet Festival. Let me take you off the beaten path here on a Friday night at Luxor. So right over there on the other side of this wall is the Nile. And on the other side of the Nile is where I live, in Luxor on the West Bank. And this is the ancient path that I'm walking on right here. There would have been an area where they would have come off the boats over here. It was, what's the word? It's not coming to mind. But this is where they would have come marching in for they would have started at Karnak. The priests would have carried the bark shrine, Vamun Kansu. They would have been towed along the Nile. It would have been a big spectacle. You would have had acrobats, dancers, the military. Everyone was involved. Musicians, Nubians that were playing music. They would all march along here, and then the priests would bring them in on their shoulders, and they would march right in through here. Now, these 2 statues here, they kind of fell under the radar. They were just added in the last couple of years. When I first started coming to Egypt over a decade ago, and I was studying here with my mentor, John Anthony West, and some of my first visits, these statues weren't even here yet. They were still underground. They're still being excavated and restored. And so these just went up in the last couple of years, few years, really. And so it's unfortunate because they never really did a big celebration or inauguration like they did for the Avenue of the Sphinxes. But what do you notice about these 2? These 2 have the Osirian pose that I mentioned earlier, right? These 2 facts. What's up with that? Jason, yeah, that's what's up with that. Anyway, so these 2 have, and notice when I said, the Osirian pose, sometimes it's low, sometimes it's middle, and sometimes it's high. And there's a reason for that. We'll save that for a future video. But again, The statues out front were not in the Osirian pose. Here you find the statues in the Osirian pose. This is where the Opet festival would have brought the three bark shrines in, and then likely had them purified and washed in the triple bark sanctuary of Ramses, which again is a reconstruction of the oldest extent here at Luxor, which was Hatshepsut and Thutmose's shrine. Over there is what they call the gate where the plebs adore, where the common people adore. And really it was a place for the uninitiated. And I'll show you what I mean. And here's a view of the mosque once again. I was able to get some photos from up there up top looking out, and I went inside, and it is remarkable because it has remnants of the temple inside, and it's really cool to see. It's something that most tourists never see. Very few photos even exist online. I'll probably tweet. Now they recently closed this off. This used to be open. You could go back here for whatever reason. Maybe they're doing some work here. They roped this section off, but this is called the gate where the plebs adore. Right over there you have the symbol, the neb symbol, the symbol below, which basically means all or every. It's like a basket, right? It could mean Lord of, or it could mean all or everything. It has several meanings in the Egyptian hieroglyphic language. In this case, it means all. And the Rakit bird has its wings tied back, right? They're back like in acquiescence to the king, to the pharaoh. And then it's hard to make out from here, but its hands are forward and they're clasped. They're actually like praying or clasped. They're actually like praying or meditating, and there's a sign there, the star, like for the duat. It's about divine connection. Another word, what it's saying is that all the people worship here, meaning that all the people worshipped here. The villagers from the East Bank could only come up to this wall. If they were uninitiated, if they were not priests or the pharaoh, they could not come in. They could not come in through the temple here. They could only stand on the other side of that wall and watch the priesthood come in from the water with the triple box shrine, do their rituals, and then carry them into the back. And so this is, we also look at it as, the Egyptologists refer to it as the gate where the plebs adore, plebs meaning the gate where the commoners adore, but we can also look at it as the uninitiated. In other words, if you weren't initiated into the mysteries, you weren't part of the priesthood, you wouldn't have access. Here we have the statues, typical cartouche on the belt from the time of Ramses. Of course, some of these statues, very suspect here, potentially usurped. There's a lot more I could talk about here with Schwaller and geometries. I'm going to skip a lot of this stuff because I just want to get to some more finer points within the temple. A lot of this stuff other people have covered. Well, some of this stuff other people have covered in videos I don't want to really get into. I want to talk about stuff that you guys aren't really familiar with. This is the remnants of the church, by the way. And then, as you can see, they built a mosque on top of it. The Egyptologists at one point tried to get them to remove the mosque, but it's the local people, it's their religion. Why not stay here? This has always been the tradition, building on top, right? So the church built on top of the sacred space, and the mosque built on top of the church. And this is, again, a representation of religious worship for more than 3,000 years here at Luxor, making it one of the longest standing temples. But what I want to show you is a clue over here. We're gonna go out back here, just move around this photo shoot here. We'll wait over here, I'll take you this way. Oh. Okay. So here we have a depiction of all the sons of Ramses. And how do we know? They're young because they're the princes of the great Ramses, from where we get the Ramses condom from, perhaps, because he had so many sons. And they all have what's called a side lock of youth. A lock, like dreadlocks. They would have, this is a Egyptian motif. Whenever they have the ponytail or the lock on the side, it means a young person. So, like one of the princes. These guys are a little, it was interesting because I was actually talking to a local Egyptian-born Egyptologist who lives in my village. And he was telling me how, if you notice, they all have the earring. And one of the indigenous traditions for him when he would go to school, he remembered one of his schoolmates. The mother had all this bad luck, and she would make him wear an earring, which was to ward off the evil eye. And they think that tradition may have survived from Egypt. So they may be wearing the ring associated with, it may be a connection. It's been continued. Here's a little gecko crawling on, a little lizard crawling on the wall here. You guys can see that there. Anyway, these three are different. They're distinct. You can see all the others are carrying, they alternate. You know, there'll be one that has the long stem. And then this one, you know, you have the ripples. And all of these things are symbolic. We don't have time to get into all of it. And I don't even know every, you know, a lot of things we have worked out, but there's a lot we don't have worked out. But you can sure bet that every number, every line has a significance. Every line, every color, every angle, everything was done with intention in ancient Egypt. But these are the sons of Ramses. We know who they are because we can look at their titles and their positions up above. The top three were the first in line. This has to do with the different Ramses' different wives, actually, because back here we have Merenptah. Merenptah is the one that usurped the stone out in front. Remember I told you? This one we know is Merenptah right here. And he's the one that took over the throne after Ramses. Anyway, what I wanted to show you is the facade. Stand up here on the... This is a representation of the Luxor Temple. A little hard to make out in this light. Can you guys see this? Let me know in the comments below. But you have the pylon right here. Right, you can see the obelisk. Where is it? Here's the obelisk we were just looking at out front earlier in this video. There's the point, right? The earth to sky, as above, so below. The earth energies. It's really alchemy. I have a whole presentation on this when we go on tour. But then you have the two seated colossi in typical Egyptian, you know, the way they would position everything in profile. And then the two statues on side with white crown. We can see the outlines. Awesome. So what do you guys notice? What did I show you out front? You had the obelisks. At this time, there are two obelisks. So you have one there, right? We have one there. You see the point? And then we have one over here. You see the other point? This is the one that's now in France in the Place de la Concorde. And we have the seated statues. We have the two standing statues behind him. And we have the two standing statues here. This one is not in Osirian pose. This one has its arm going down, just like the others. They're all uniform. But when we're out in front of the temple, the statue that's here, that's recently been restored in the last few years, the arms are crossed in Osirian pose. And what I'm saying is that that statue we see out front does not belong there. And my guess is the authorities just put it there to make it look uniform. That, you know, and some of my colleagues agree with me on this. That statue should be around on the side of the temple. I think. I can't say, that's conjecture, but it doesn't belong there. There's no way. There's no way. You can see what it looked like right here. This is the statue, and his arm is not in Osirian pose, right? So, and we know that there were the other two statues on the side of the temple that I showed you that were in Osirian pose. They would have been on the side. And so what I think is where I just took you, the gate where the Plebs Door, where the uninitiated would stand to watch the ceremonies, there would have been two statues in Osirian pose standing there. And one of them is the remnants that they found out front, which probably got moved around over time because a lot of the temple fell into pieces, especially when Ashurbanipal and the Persians came here and destroyed stuff. Things got knocked around. Everybody wants to say cataclysm. It's always cataclysm. Cataclysm is the answer for everything. And while I think it is could be the answer for some things, you know, there's a lot of context that a lot of alternative authors miss because they actually don't look into Egyptology, the Egyptological context. They want to write off Egyptology. I find value on both sides. And perhaps this isn't why my YouTube channel never grows, because I'm not in either camp. I'm not an alternative researcher. In a sense, I am an esoteric researcher, but I'm not an alternative and I'm not mainstream. I look at both sides. I read everybody's books on both sides and I can find value in both sides. So like, you don't find me sitting in one side. I honestly, 90% of the alternative authors out there and researchers don't agree with. And I think a lot of them are pulling the wool over your eyes. On the other hand, I don't think Egyptology has it, exactly down either. So I really just try to draw from both sides. And because I'm an independent researcher, staying independent, walking that middle lane, I think, I haven't really found, my audience hasn't found me, because people are either looking for the alternative side or they're looking at the mainstream side, and Anyextee is somewhere in the middle, because I'm about the objective truth. There's always going to be three sides to a story. There's your side, there's my side, and then there's objective truth, which we can't really know. But that's what I'm geared toward. That's what I'm a truth seeker. I come from the esoteric tradition. Over here, this is another form of sympathetic magic. You can see the bull or the calves here, and it's got, instead of horns, I'll get you closer. So see, instead of the cow's horns, you have they take on the shape of arms and the head of a Nubian. We can tell by the hair, or maybe a Libyan. But whatever the case, it is one of the enemies of Egypt. What are these triangles behind? Before all the alternative researchers go, look, there's the three pyramids. Understand that these are the symbols for bread. And yes, the ancient Egyptians actually had these triangular forms for bread. They had many different shapes of bread. We found these molds. Egyptologists have them in the archaeological record. And this is a big problem for a lot of alternative researchers. They don't know how to read hieroglyphs. I've taken the time to study from a PhD degreed Egyptologist through her program to learn the Middle Egyptian hieroglyphic language. And I've been coming here for years. So learning the hieroglyphs really helps. And I don't know them 100%. I'm still working through some of them. But when you start to read the context around everything and not just look at the pictures, things take on a whole other dimension. But you can see they're bringing all the offerings. Then you have all the sons of Ramses. Ezek. Tamam? Alhamdulillah. Ezba. Bayrat, West Bank. Yes. Yes, Ezba. Yes. Tamam, alhamdulillah. Yeah, so here's the facade of the Luxor Temple. And then you have one of the best images of Seshat, the consort of Jehuti, over here. Yeah, Nefertari. See you before. It's okay. 4 o'clock mini. Let me go. We talk about this on the tour. This is the Sematawi, highly symbolic, but this line is also a nod to this is part of Schwal's work. I'm not going to get into it here. There's actually a lot that we could talk about here, but I just want to move things along a bit. This head, interestingly, this was actually found. This wasn't always here. It was only in the last couple of decades. This was hiding out in the Cairo Egyptian Museum, and the head of the University of Chicago actually found it, Chicago House, found it in the museum and recognized the pattern and realized that it belongs to this statue and brought it back from the museum to the Luxor Temple and, put it back together. Some people say this is the boy King Tut and his wife. Others say it is Amenhotep. In any event, it's the king taking on Amun. So whether it's Tut or Amenhotep, whatever camp you're in with that. Others even have tried, and really the cartouches say something entirely different because it's been usurped by Horemheb and then Ramses. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's not even the messenger, it's the message, it's the principle. It's the royal principle taking on the form of Amun and Amunet or Mutamoya, from where we get the word mother. You see the vulture head. I won't get into the symbolism of the vulture here. Again, we spend more time with these things and go into the deeper esoteric aspects on tour. But you can see here's her hand. It's her presenting him. A lot of things came, a lot of the lineage would come down through the female line from the mother. And so it's not like she's necessarily supporting him, but she's presenting him. Yes. She gives Ramses, Usar Matra, yes. Amun, Amunet, yes. Or Tut as Amun, either Tut or Amun, or Amenhotep as Amun and Amunet. Yes, with Ramses, Usar Matra. And Tut, yes. Mafish Fulus, doctor. Shukran. So He's just trying to show me stuff I already know. So, okay, so she's presenting him with the hand. And this is really one of the early versions of behind every good man is a great woman, the sacred divine principle. This is Tut at Karnak. These are depictions of Karnak, and then all of this is depictions of what we call the Opet festival, which is where they brought the bark shrine. You'll see different dancers and acrobats that go on the Nile. You can see the river Nile. And what do you notice here? You have 7 columns with the open capitals. 7, according to my mentor, John Anthony West, and esoteric numerology is the number of the number of process, growth, and cycles. And so it's really appropriate because you have the Karnak over here with the beginning of the Opet festival, the whole Opet festival going from Karnak to Luxor. This really took place, and this wall is depicting it. And then on the other side of the wall, on the east side, it starts from Luxor Temple and it goes back to Karnak, completing a full cycle, which is in line with the number symbolism 7 or 14, which, you know, is also a number of cycles. And then, of course, we're now in the femur bone. Remember, I talked about going through the human body, the symbolist approach, the idea that you're in the Temple of Man. And over here at the end of the Opet festival, I'll show you something that corresponds to the Temple of Man. This, by the way, so the Ankh, which means to give life, life is given. The Ankh has many interpretations of what it could represent, from water. I've heard a bunch of different things. The most favorable for me, obviously, the Egyptologists say it's a sign of life. And it is, because you have the feminine and you have the masculine principles coming together. You have the two, you know, the duality of it. The masculine and feminine principle comes together to give life. You need the male and the female to give life. This is the symbol for give, the Ankh, to give life. And then here's a cartouche for Ramses. And these are all these deep sunken reliefs. Look, my fingers can go all the way in here. This is the work of Ramses, juxtaposed against the finer detail you see of the Opet festival, which is post-Armana reliefs, which are remembering the time of Akhenaten. So when Tut and some of the predecessors were still they were still influenced by Akhenaten's Amana artwork. Akhenaten not only started a revolution, a religious revolution, they say, bringing it back, you know, to monotheism, but also an artistic revolution. And he changed some of the writing, the written language as well. It's more than I want to get into right now. You have some reliefs of Ramses over here. There's so much, guys. I could be here for 8 hours in this temple. I could actually be here for a week in this temple if, you know, really breaking it down real quick. Okay, so I told you that notice the suckle, it starts to go up here. We're going up the primordial mound. We're now in this areas like the solar plexus, and where we are now is really at the waist of the human body. Just below the waist, we have the reproductive glands, the sex glands, which are, you know, you're going to find Min all over the temple. There's no doubt about that. That's unquestionable. Min Kamutef is represented all throughout the temple. They're closing the lights. We have to get out of here. But here we have Min, the ithyphallic Min, and his phallus is chiseled out. But this is exactly, if the male figure was turned to its side and superimposed on the temple, this is exactly where the phallus would be, and where the human wrists fall on the body. On the other side, we find wrists, and there's more to it, but the Luxor Temple is closing. As you can see, I'm now in the dark. They want to keep us in the dark, just as I was getting to the good stuff. So I can't show you the Holy of Holies or the third eye or any of that. That'll be another video. But right here in the middle of this so-called solar court is a lintel. And when Schwaller put this plan together, actually his stepdaughter, Lucy Lammy, brought this to the French mission of Egyptologists were working here, and they couldn't really read the hieroglyphs at that time, the Schwaller and his daughter, so they brought it to Egyptologist Alexander Verrill, who read the glyphs for them. And what Schwaller was looking for is something that would potentially connect to the navel, because this is where the navel would be, corresponding to the human body. And right there, exactly where it's expected, the Egyptologist read for them that it says this is the birthplace of the king, right where you would have the omphalos, the navel, the belly button. Now, there's much more to this. Again, this is building off of Schwaller's work. I go into great detail in my book. There's a lot more I add to it. There's something I wanted to show you on my original observations, but I'm not going to be able to show you in this light right now. So we'll have to come back to do another video. I am going to have a documentary coming on the Luxor Temple of Man, so you'll also be able to see more there. But if you're interested in picking up my book, The Esoteric Symbolist Guide to the Luxor Temple of Man, you can head over to anyextee.com. That's ANYEXTEE.com. and get on the email list there to receive updates to the book. And if you want to join me in Egypt in the field, me and Johanna this September, or me and Kaylee this October, you can head over to adeptexpeditions.com and learn how you can join one of our tours. I can hear the prayer call in the back. That's our cue. It's time to go. These columns, by the way, a final word. The columns in the back, they're thought to represent papyrus. They're papyrus columns. Papyrus is or representing the organic life, and here they're closed, right? Let me show you this. Okay, so the negative space in between, these are organic, they're recreated in stone, organic motifs that are recreated in stone. The negative space in between is the void. So it's essentially creation out of the void. And at Karnak, we see very unusual columns in the Akhmenu, which actually makes the principle visible. I'll have to do another video on it. I can't really show you guys this in the dark. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me here on a Friday night at the Luxor Temple. So much more to see. Right over here is the Hatshepsut shrine, now in ruins, on the other side of that wall. Few clues over there that indicate some things. We'll have, again, maybe I'll do another video here. Thanks for watching, Stein. Thank you everyone for watching. Appreciate you all. I'm about to go down the street here and hop on a motorboat and go across the River Nile and go back home. When I get an opportunity, I will respond to all the comments that I missed. I know I did a lot of talking. I didn't get to really see too many of the comments or answer any of the questions. Please do share the video. Take you guys out into the streets of Luxor for a little bit. Salam. This is where all the tourists go. They all load the bus and they go back to their hotels. I'm gonna be probably one of the only ones walking out of here that's not taking a bus. This is what the tour buses look like when you come on tour with us. We have these giant air-conditioned coaches to take our groups. This could be you guys. Head over to adeptexpeditions.com. This could be you. We have a couple of spaces that opened up for September. We got October. And then Johanna James and I are actually doing a second tour in March, an ancient technology and esoteric symbolism tour this March here in Egypt as well. And to add to that, Johanna, James, and I are also going to be doing a Turkey tour in ancient Turkey. We're going to Anatolia. We'll see Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, all the ancient sites there in October 2023. La shukran. La shukran. La. Hello, ازيك?
Welcome to Egypt, my friend.
I live in Egypt, my friend. West Bank, West is the best. Asanez. Bayrat, Bayrati, Saidi, and the Masuri. Ya Habibi. This is how you enter Abu El Khagag, the mosque, which, again, inside the mosque contains the remnants of the Luxor Temple that you don't see. Over here, the bookstore, the booty, which actually has a pretty impressive collection of alternative books. You'll find many of the venerated alternative authors' books in here, as well as important Egyptological works. They have everything. Best bookstore in Luxor right here. They even have Schwaller's book. They have the Temple of Man. They have Schwaller's Karnak book. I have a video. I forget if I posted it to his channel or not. Going into the bookstore to actually purchase a new copy of Temple of Man. Temple in Man. He has two books, Temple of Man and Temple in Man. There's the smaller one, which is like a primer and an introductory book, and then the two-volume opus. And of course, Schwaller's not an easy read. Came a little easier for me because of my background in Western esoteric studies. But for most people, Schwaller's going to be a harder read. John Anthony West makes it more palatable. And even John Anthony West, if you read Serpent in the Sky, that and some of his work can be a little complex for some people who may not be acquainted with these sort of concepts. And so what I'm doing in my book is I'm trying to simplify it, take it a step further, and make it an easier read, and at the same time add my own original observations and research to the work. Hello. Bayrat. Yeah, they got cotton candy over here. They got corn, street corn. Over here, it's almost like an open air museum, so all the archaeologists store all the stones from different periods. You have the Greek stuff way in the back. Someone from shukran. Fokak mini, shukran. So the way the temple's laid out, again, that's the stomach. Then you have the lungs, the heart, the neck, the thyroid gland, the mouth, the optical center, and then a part of the head which represents our the glands that are attributed to mystical experience, such as the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland. The triple sanctuary is thought to represent the anterior and posterior of the pituitary gland. And then the temple truncates and cuts right off where our highest centers would be. And in other traditions, we refer to as the crown chakra. I want to be walking right through the crown chakra. Here. Hello, Ezayek. Here we have all the mysterious scoop marks. quite a mystery. The Egyptologists tell us, and there is documentation for this, that local people would take some of the stone from the temple and they would use the dust. There's some reports that say they would put it in a drink and swallow it. There's another school of thought that's emerged that say they would take it and they would use it as like an application, like a topical, to take care of different skin diseases. And then but I'm not even sure that either of those are a sufficient explanation for the mission of the scoop marks. And then when we go to other temples, sometimes the scoop marks are running horizontally. Mafish Falus. Mafish Falus. No Falus. No Falus. Yeah, Mafish Falus. Ah, shukran. And then look down below, we got the. Fokag Mini. Next, yeah, next. Anyextee. Fokag Mini, let me be free. Yeah. What's your name?
Fadi.
What is it?
I'm Fadi.
Fadi. What's your name? What is it? Mustafa? Ah.
I'm crazy.
Me?
No.
You. Him. These kids. So look, it almost looks like the remnants of a previous temple down here. This is all supposed to be Amenhotep III, designed by Amenhotep son of Hapu, who would have had the idea for the Luxor Temple of Man. But you can see it almost looks like, you know, reused blocks. Of course, we can read the hieroglyphs, so we can tell what some of them are attributed to, but then again, you can't always use the hieroglyphs to date the stone. As we know, a lot of the hieroglyphs were written at later periods. You can't date the object. This Ankh is very important. Millions of years. The Ankh, as Schwaller pointed out, lines up exactly with the axis of the temple. This is the center of the head right here, the portal. And then there's Ankhs on the inside that line up with the other axes. The axes are important. I go over them. It's very deep and complex. I won't be able to go over it in this video. That may be a future video, but it's actually best explained in my book. Why it has a skewed axis. This is the back of the Luxor Temple. This is Luxor. I'm gonna go across the water, across the Nile to the west bank. And this is Anyextee. And I hope you guys appreciated hanging out on a Friday night at the Luxor Temple. Habibi! All right, everybody, this is Anyextee. Please, if you're new here, consider subscribing to the channel. Like, comment, and all that jazz. I'll see you guys in the next video. This Sunday at 7 o'clock GMT 2 time, Egypt time, I have a new vlog coming, my Living in Luxor vlog, where we're going to show you snow in Egypt. It's already up. You can click on the page and set a reminder, and we'll show you snow in Egypt and a side of Egypt that you never see. 30 Egyptian to go across the Ramla. 30? Smash it. Tamam, alhamdulillah. Yeah. You must do a comment. You live on YouTube.
Welcome.
YouTube.
Welcome to Luxor.
Yeah.
Welcome you and your.
Ah, you know me. He has me. You know me. Yeah. Smash it. He has an Anyextee. Look, guys. Famous in Luxor. Me.
Yeah,
He knows me.
I know you are a maker.
How much subscribers?
Get it from him. Get it from him.
How much subscribers?
Only 20, so I need you to 20,000. So I need you to subscribe. Subscribe. Tell all Masri subscribe. Ah, he's going this way. Shukran.
Someday have a nice look.
Shukran. Inshallah.
Inshallah, bro.
Hello, welcome.
Shukran.
Nice Rasta.
Rasta never die. So you guys can see the Luxor Temple is right back over there. Jason, you want to go to Egypt? I know a really good guide and tour leader. Hint, hint. You can learn more at adeptexpeditions.com. I have 2 major tours coming up, September, October, another in March. And I'm also available for private tours. I have a lot of clients that come out, individuals and small groups that are looking for a tour leader. I live here in Luxor, so it's all depending on availability. But we would love to have you in Egypt. So we're now going across the River Nile to the land of the West. Can't see a minute. This one? Yeah. We're just gonna switch motorboats. 30 Egyptian, right? Oh, they got me on the Bar Molly boat. Yeah. Got the Bob Marley flag waving in the background. Let me know if you guys get any questions, any last minute questions before I sign out. I'll be happy to answer anything. Any of you enjoy this content and you're in position to help out financially, you can hit the super chat, and or you can always support. If you like my content, you can help me do this full time and make it sustainable so that I don't have to worry about taking on as many clients in my family, and I can focus more on content for you guys by becoming Patreon supporters of Patreon. You can head over to patreon.com/Anyextee. But again, I realize times are tough right now with inflation, and it's difficult for people to support. Your viewership is equally important to me, and sharing the video. Help me share the video to let YouTube's algorithm know that we've got good content over here. If you enjoy it. If you don't, give it a dislike or let me know. So just a few final words. I don't know if you can hear me with the wind blowing. Can you guys hear me? If you can hear me, let me know in the comments. The wind is blowing. Jason, open for shows? What do you mean by shows? We hear you. Okay, thank you, Nico. Okay, good. So just to orient you, again, we're coming from the east, we're going to the west, right? So obviously this is north, that's going toward Cairo. This is south, going toward like Edfu and Aswan. This mountain back here, right on the other side of that mountain right there, that's Hatshepsut's temple back, well, right over there. Right on the other side of that is the Valley of the Kings. And then right over here is the Valley of the Queens. And right back there is my house. Although I'm actually moving. I'm moving to a new location this month. But I'll still be living on the west bank of Luxor. Live stream about Egypt. Yeah. I mean, Jason, do you mean shows like I'm live streaming about Egypt right now, but do you mean like a podcast or a radio show? I need all of that, actually. I mean, sometimes I get invites to do these things, and I just can't keep up because I have a lot going on. But once the book comes out, I definitely plan on doing as many podcasts as I can with others and doing some radio shows and so forth. We got some technical difficulties. Modern technology in ancient Egypt. Hello, Jose.
Jose.
Let's see. How can I get? I can't see all the comments. When I hold the phone like this in vertical view, the comments just appear and then they just disappear. I don't know how to get the comments to stick so I can read them all. I'll have to go back later. Jason, yeah, anything you can do to help, I appreciate it. If people are interested, what I would like to do is actually come back to America at some point and do a national tour, where a presentation tour, especially now that I have the book coming out. And I've actually been thinking about doing an Ancient America tour as well. That's been on the agenda for a few years. For those of you that have been following me will know that, you know, when I was living in America, I went around coast to coast documenting all the ancient archaeological and indigenous sites: Serpent Mound, Cahokia, Winnemucca, all the mounds. I mean, hundreds of mound sites, petroglyphs, and so forth. Everything we could get in America. We were out on the road for 6 weeks. Everything we can get within that time frame. But then when I came back home, I was with my family and I filmed the documentary. But when we arrived back home, we came home to a home disaster, and unfortunately, we lost our home and everything in it, which is a big part of the reason why I'm in Egypt now. Aside from the fact that I do tours here, I moved here because it's just a lower cost of living and we need to financially rebuild. But that said, I still have all this unpublished footage from my Ancient America road trip, and I was planning on doing an Ancient America series and documentary. We kicked it off with my man Chuck, CF Apps. Rest in peace. I went out on the road. I met Chuck in Vegas. He interviewed me. I interviewed him. I was on his channel, and then, you know, shortly after that, unfortunately, unexpectedly, he passed away. And so I'm going to dedicate that entire series to CF Apps, who, if you're not familiar with, I'm sure many of you are. He's done a remarkable job of taking a look at sites around the world. I mean, he's the epitome of an armchair archaeologist from his home using Google Earth, which is remarkable. Hey, there he is.
How are you?
Tamam, alhamdulillah. All right, we're on the West Bank. And there's two ways I can go home. I can either go up the main street over here and take you guys through the main road, or I could cut through Ramla and go through the back village. Or I could just take a taxi or a tuk-tuk. Hello.
Yeah, I take you.
La, I remember.
You remember me?
I remember you, yes.
Talk about the dogs and you don't
Yeah. I didn't go yet. I'm busy. Inshallah. Walk, Ramla. Just walk. La, shukran. We're gonna walk. Camera, YouTube, just walk. Mesh. I see you, inshallah. Ezek. salam. Alhamdulillah. All right, guys, it's not a whole lot to see. We're just gonna go through Ramla, walk through the village, and I'm gonna head back home. So this is Anyextee signing out. Hope you guys appreciated this. Esba, the best, Sasanez. West is the best. Peace out, everybody.